Layovers 005 to Munich. Hi, Alex.
Hey,
How are
I'm
you?
good. I'm good. Happy Monday.
Happy Monday. We're going to Munich this
Yeah,
week.
exciting. I'm excited to talk about Munich a little bit later. It's I learned a lot about this airport that I've been to a few times, but I think there's some interesting stuff that we're going to share a little bit later.
Yeah, exactly. The first, a few news about the show itself. We got a lot of views on the
We really
last week's show.
did.
That was more than 650 listens, so that's really good. Thank you everyone for the support. The sound, we got some good feedback that the sound was actually better. We went live with a new system last week, so we really hope that we'll be able to continue to have such a good sound. Please continue to give us feedback either on Twitter, Facebook. Everything is on our
Yeah,
website.
I wish you guys could see my setup in my office here. My wife calls it the my blanket fortress because I've just hung blankets and soundproofing up all around. It looks a little like fourth gradey, but it seems to work.
No, exactly. Your sound is much better. I used to see books behind you, and now I just see like a big bunch of like clothing and stuff. The other thing, we've been added our show to, I didn't mention this last week, to Stitcher as well. Anyway, if you want to learn about how to listen to the show, you can just go on layovers.to/FAQ, and you'll have a lot of insight on how to listen to us, follow us, etc. Coming back to, so the big news of the week is basically the same as last week because everybody talks about it. Is still the U.S. versus Gulf Airlines. Wherever you would go, either on forums like airliners or flyer talk, everybody is actually talking about this. There's like fist fights on who's right, what's fair, what's unfair, etc. Have you seen the same
Yeah,
thing?
the hottest topic I've seen in the airline world in a very, very long time, and it's frightening how quickly it escalated. I know we said that last week, but I'm amazed by this. I really am.
There's something called the Godwin's law. It's like when you have a debate, very quickly, how fast you go to name the other party a Nazi, Nazi like a German
Yeah,
SS.
yeah.
Well, I mean, it didn't go that far, but it's almost gone that far because just after we recorded last week, the CEO of Delta, Anderson, said on Richard Quest, the anchor from CNN, he said that it's a great irony to have the UAE from the Arabian Peninsula talk about that, given the fact that our industry was really shocked by the terrorism of 9/11, which came from terrorists from the Arabian Peninsula. So, wow, you're
What
like,
was he thinking? What was
yeah,
he thinking?
I think it was, to be fair, I think it was a heat of the moment. It's a very touchy subject of 9/11 is, but also this whole what is fair, what is unfair. Delta's PR department went into crisis mode. They released a first press release that was not that great. So, like on the heels of it, they released the second press release that actually backtracked even more. They apologized for it. Richard Quest invited the representatives of the major three Gulf airlines next, and you had also Al Baker was the CEO of Qatar Airways. He's always very outspoken. We know him. And he said, quite frankly, I think Mr. Anderson needs to go and study in a university to find out what the difference is between equity and subsidy. And then he goes out to call out, many subsidies the U.S. has done. And he also calls basically Anderson to be inefficient. He's a very inefficient CEO. So, but that's Al Baker. Much cooler head prevailed with Tim Clark. He's a very, very, very smart guy in the industry, the CEO of Emirates. He said, I'm not angry. I'm a little bit concerned that Mr. Anderson crossed the line with what he said in regard to 9/11, which has caused great offense in this part of the world, obviously. When you think about it, Delta is partner on SkyTeam with Saudia, which is the Saudi
Yeah.
Airways. I'm not sure. There hasn't been any comments of that. Again, we're not here to say what was right, was wrong. It goes to show that it's a very, very touchy subject. We haven't heard the end of
No,
it,
we
I
haven't. I
believe.
think it was a very strange thing to say for the CEO of arguably the world's largest airline, and we'll actually talk about that a little bit later. But what a strange, strange thing to say that really made no point. It didn't in any way boost his argument that the Emirates or Qatar or anybody else is subsidized in a manner that is in somehow unfair. So it was such a strange thing to say that derailed the argument entirely and probably will put off this Senate hearing or government hearing in the U.S. For a long time, or at least take away any of its credibility.
Yeah, then also some sides have been kind of been created here because we said last week. So the unions were for once aligned with the major four U.S. airlines, but U.S. airports have actually sided with Open Skies, so they obviously sided with free trade agreements to say they want competition because obviously a lot of them are actually winning by having new airlines. Smaller airlines are not part of the big four. So JetBlue, especially, has also expressed its support for free trade agreements in the skies. The U.S. Business Travel Coalition, when they are actually that comment was interesting. It said now that U.S. airlines have secured antitrust immunity, industry consolidation and blah 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 are basically, he says that carriers are shamelessly seeking to close off U.S. markets to competition from foreign carriers. But he mentions immunity. One thing that I think people do not understand is what is that immunity. So basically, when a U.S. airline, U.S. carrier goes into an alliance, especially it was created first and foremost for transatlantic flights with other airlines. So we have the three big ones: One World, Star Alliance, and SkyTeam. They gain some kind of immunity, so they cannot be prosecuted for antitrust
Yeah.
violations. And that is the argument of smaller airlines or airlines are not part of an alliance. It's, yeah, well, what about us? Which, by the way, makes me think that isn't, and I want to ask you the question, Alex. Do you think that basically that move from the four big US carriers isn't basically a nudge to say to the three ones in the Gulf, hey guys, just join an alliance and let's get done with this?
Well, possibly, yeah. But one of them already is part of an alliance. Qatar is part of One World now. Uh,
True.
I don't know. I don't think so. I think that the U.S. carriers are not seeing the benefit of the low fuel costs that they thought they would. The consolidations are taking longer. They're more expensive, and they are terrified by the fact that Emirates can drop a A380 on the Milan New York route. Just
Which will happen.
which has happened, yeah, and that the fact that their yields from Dallas to Dubai are very, very low, and it doesn't bother them because they are a profitable airline. It's I think it's fear, frankly. I really do think it's fear. I'm not suggesting, I haven't drawn my own conclusions on this yet, that there wasn't a subsidy involved in the Middle Eastern carriers, but I think it was a gigantic misstep by the big U.S. carriers to do this again.
Oh, you just mentioned oil, and we'll get to that because today we decided, since it was a hot topic, we'll talk. The main topic of the show later on will be about the rise of these three Gulf carriers. We'll go a little bit over the history to inform people and make let all of them have a better opinion. We have our own, not defined. I mean, I'm like you. It's very, like I said last week, it's very hard to take sides. One thing though I wanted to mention here, because you just mentioned oil, is that Emirates just is considering dropping the fuel surcharge.
Which, yeah, and you know my opinion on this. I think that is a very large symbolic middle finger to the U.S. carriers. It's just another, oh, look at the another arrow that we have in our quiver to beat you guys. We can do this all day, every day. Bring it.
But to be fair, if you look at the airlines in the U.S., Hawaiian has dropped the fuel surcharge from flights to and from South Korea. It has reduced it to flights to and from Japan. So it's possible.
It is possible, and I welcome any airline and any country that drops any form of ancillary penalty. As frankly, I think that's what they are. Air passenger duty here in the UK, fuel surcharges. I urge you guys, next time you book a plane ticket, look at the fare breakdown. And you will get so angry. There's nothing you can do about it, which is a really unpleasant feeling. But it's awful, the number of fees and things that are tacked on to every plane ticket that we buy. So anybody that's taking steps to eliminate or at least reduce these is a champion as far as I'm concerned.
I do agree, especially with the price of oil falling down everywhere, by the way, not only in the Middle East, because some people are confused about this. It's, it's about, I mean, we'll get over this in the later segment of the show. The last comment I want to make about this is that probably this debate can be linked as well with the fact that the DOT hasn't still given the license to fly for Norwegian. So Norwegian is trying to do a low-cost airline that will actually fly from Europe to the US and back. And usually, these kind of licenses, are given in, 2-3 months.
Yeah.
It hasn't happened yet. It's been more than a
Yeah,
year.
one word there, lobbying.
Yeah, exactly. This is
This
so meaning this
protectionism.
is the same. Yeah.
If you want to go at that end of the argument, it is. I think it feels like protectionism. Having been on the receiving end of this, it's not fun, and I feel sorry for Norwegian. I really do.
Yeah, because you had a personal experience with when you tried to create Virgin America,
Yeah,
right?
it's not a fun feeling. It's frustrating when you know you're bringing a superior product to the market. But I really hope that Norwegians stick through it. I hope they've got their pockets are deep enough to sustain this fight, and it's a good fight. They should continue it.
Moving on, another protectionist market, North Korea.
Well, actually, yeah, I was going to talk about North Korea, but there's something else I found that actually
Oh,
I
sorry.
found this last night, and it really concerned me. And I'd be interested to hear if you think that this is real or if it's something we should genuinely be concerned about. It's about toxic fumes in cabins. Now we all hear these Daily Mail news stories about we're going to get sick because they recycle the cabin air. Categorically not true. Recycled air in airplane cabins is cleaner than it is in hospitals, or as clean as it is in hospitals. There are so many studies to back that up. This is not what this is about. What this came from is a coroner in the county of Dorset here in England that said that people who are regularly, frequently, i.e. cabin crew and very frequent flyers, who are exposed to fumes that are circulating in the cabin can be irreversibly damaged by it. And it's called aerotoxic syndrome. And what happens is, in a normal plane, there's a system that compresses air from the engines, bleed air, and uses it to pressurize the cabin and to also regulate the temperature. If it malfunctions, and it can, what happens is oil particles start entering the air supply, and they're not always caught in the filters. But even if they are, prolonged exposure to them apparently can have a cumulative effect on these frequent flyers. And this all came about because there was a senior first officer who died in 2012.
Yeah, correct.
And the claim was that he had been poisoned over time by these toxic cabin fumes. And this coroner is absolutely adamant that this killed him, that this was the root cause. And a number of other people have come forward to say that this is true, and this has affected them, their flight deck crew, their cabin crew. The government has said, and I quote, "Concerns about significant risk to the health of airline passengers and crew are not substantiated." This is the CAA, which is the UK Civil Aviation Authority. So they have a vested interest in this not being the case. And it is, again, quote, "nothing that passengers or crew should be overly concerned about." What do you think about it? Do you think this is real? Do you think it's a one-off?
It's very hard to have well-informed opinion on this because, first of all, I'm not a doctor, not am I a chemist, or so it's there's a bit of fear mongering. I don't know if the airline is, as like you just mentioned, is as the air in an aircraft is safer than one from the hospital. Although I've had cases in my family of people where actually got a nasty bug within an hospital, and I never got a bug in a plane. So maybe I don't know, but I think, I mean, it's very hard for me to have an informed opinion. I do not think that it is that dangerous. Otherwise, we would have heard much more about it, and especially from pilots, because for the most exposed people in the industry, which should be the crew, the staff, we haven't heard a lot about it. So I guess more studies will have to be made. I'm not discounting it completely as some crazy, anti-science, discourse, but I have my very big doubts.
Yeah, I do too. I think the number of studies that have come out about cabin air quality, it feels like it should have put this to rest. Now, I know what they're saying is that it's the cumulative effect as opposed to germs in the air or anything like that.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, of course.
But you think you recall the number of studies that have come out about radiation exposure to frequent flyers and especially flight crew. There have been so many studies about that have proven that, yes, they are exposed to increased levels of radiation. That this hasn't been studied over and over again if it was really a legitimate concern. So I'm interested to see. There's a lawsuit pending as a result of this, and apparently this lawyer represents 50 other people from cabin crews, Emirates, Cathay, Etihad, Thomas Cook, EasyJet, et cetera, et cetera. I will be interested to see if this even makes it to trial.
What it could actually do, which would be the good side of this, it would actually lead to maybe better studies, not better, but maybe like to having it in the public eye will actually maybe force a lot of new studies to be made, not that I'm discounting any of the past studies that have been made about this. I think it's something that we should be informed about. Maybe not us, again, as even if we're freaking flyer, we're not as exposed our crew. But I mean, I'm open that that we have a better information about this. But honestly, again, I can ask my dad; he's a doctor. But besides that,
yeah,
very hard for me. The one thing I would say, I know it's not it's more light. Having flown in, I know it's stupid comment here. I'm really sorry for that, guys. Having flown many times, obviously, and having been lucky to be in the front cabin, so in the premium part of the plane, I have many times in my life, and I want to ask you that to you, Alex. I have smelled cigarette smoke, and not coming from the lavatories, obviously,
in flight.
No, it's forbidden in flight. And I have two pilots, friends of mine, who said that occasionally we would actually have a smoke in the cockpit. And since the air is pushed back, because especially in case of a fire, etc., the cockpit has to be extremely safe. Right. You would actually feel a slight. I mean, nothing disturbing, and you have to be very, very close to the cockpit. But I don't know if that's true or not. I know it's supposedly forbidden, but I would understand, especially for the maybe older pilots that are still smoking. Maybe they said, you know what, I'd rather have a quiet, like a calm pilot than somebody that has to go without a smoke.
All right, well,
hours.
okay.
I don't know
if there's any pilots out there listening that can confirm or deny this rumor.
Yes.
Hit us up, because that's a good one.
Anything you wanted to add about this?
I'm just interested to see if this trial actually happens. I'm skeptical, but it's a health thing, and I welcome any investigations into anything that can improve in-flight health.
So talking about in-flight health, you people that listen to us realize that I just skipped a bit here because Alex changed the order, because that's how we work. We have an Excel spreadsheet basically on Google Docs, and we go over all the topics we're gonna. So now, of course, didn't catch that he had added this topic here instead of later. So my bad. I apologize for that. I still wanna hear you, even if it's like 30 seconds, about that Air Force One from North Korea, because I think I love that story.
Yeah. Okay. So some pictures emerged last week, I think it was, on the Jalopnik's aviation site, which is great, by the way. We'll post a link to it. And it was pictures of this newly quote unquote newly refurbished North Korean Air Force One, and it looks, well, it's I'm sure you can picture it. It was tacky and gaudy and awful, and not an Emirates business class seat was way, way nicer than this plane. And it sort of it did a bunch of flights over Pyongyang, kind of showing off to the people that this is what I'm
wondering if it would. I'm wondering if it would ever be flying elsewhere, because we know that North Korea is on the no-fly list in the US. The EU blacklist is actually including North Korea, except from the Tupolev, the 204, I think, from Air Koryo, so from the flag carrier. So I'm wondering if this actually jet will be able to fly anywhere.
Well, it's an interesting question. It's an Ilyushin 62, and it's been repainted. But Kim Jong-il, the former leader, was terrified of flying.
Yeah, he would take the train everywhere.
So he would take the train all the way to Moscow if necessary. So perhaps, I don't know if we'll see it in the skies, but it's pretty awful.
Anyway, we'll put the link at the show. Moving on, because we have to mention this aircraft every week. So the A380, I had mentioned, I think it was 2 episodes ago, that Turkish was rumored to be interested in A380. And actually, it might actually happen, because the Malaysia Airlines has been having a very bad year, so they need less capacity. They have 6 A380s. but they don't no longer need the capacity. So in terms of right size their fleet, they might actually wet lease two of them to Turkish. So Turkish will actually introduce A380s, probably to the Istanbul to London routes. It's not sure yet. It's an interesting way of testing actually an aircraft. I think Turkish did the same when they first tried a 777. Instead of going for orders first, they said, "Oh, let's just wet lease a few, see if that fits in our model, and then maybe order more." What do you think?
It's a good way to test the market. If anyone can make it work, it's Turkish. That talk about a hub and spoke or hub model airline that runs everything through Istanbul and is positioning itself as a premium carrier, not just in that market but globally. I think it makes a lot of sense. Malaysian have a new CEO coming on board, the former CEO of Aer Lingus, so it'll be interesting to see what long-term changes that he has in mind.
I think he might actually like that plan because Christoph Müller is the name of the CEO, and I think he will enter. I think his contract with Aer Lingus is finishing in April.
Yes, they accelerated it because Malaysian were desperate to have him on board quickly for obvious reasons.
But if you look at the job that it did at Aer Lingus, it was basically kind of rebuild the airline and make it something. And I think it would actually maybe welcome from the Malaysian Airlines point of view to say, okay, we have these 6 massive jets. We don't know what to do with them. Just wet lease them, to have extra revenue and to actually focus on on the core business for a little while. And I think that actually works for him too. I mean, we'll see if he changes course when he comes in, but I think he would actually like that.
Yeah, I do too. I think it'll be interesting to see what they end up doing with them, and if they don't put in an order. I mean, God knows there's available A380s, and Airbus is looking to get rid of them. The Skymark ones that we've talked about. But
yeah, Airbus must be happy.
Yeah, it's a good move for them, long term or short term.
Talking about the longest. So you want to go?
Yeah. So this is an interesting one. So there was an announcement a couple of days ago that Gulfstream, the corporate jet manufacturer, had broken around the world record, and they've flown this G3650ER, which is extended range. It flew around the world in one stop with one fuel stop. So from New York to Beijing to Savannah, Georgia. Again, Jalopnik referred to it as one ass-numbing flight, which is absolutely true. Now, a lot of people are debating whether or not this was a world record because they did the polar route, the Great Circle route. But what's really interesting here is the speed that they were able to maintain. An average speed of 0.87 Mach for 13 hours and 20 minutes is extraordinary. Much faster than a commercial flight. And they did,
correct.
That airplane had broken previous records. They'd done LA to Melbourne in 14 hours and 58 minutes, which is substantially quicker than a normal commercial airliner could do. No matter how you cut this, the plane is extraordinary. The performance is extraordinary. And they're really pushing the envelope for that optimization of speed and range, where in the past, it's you sacrifice a little bit of speed to get from point A to point B. It's just going to take you a little bit longer. These guys are pushing to get further, faster, which is always a good thing.
You should, so people are interested in these type of records. You can go to FII.org, so the Fédération Aéronautique Internationale. I can use my French again. And the website is like loads of records in there because all the records are divided by type of plane, type of aircraft, etc., etc. You just mentioned the commercial aircraft, and I think the record is held by 777-200 long range, which I think did Heathrow to Hong Kong. I think it's 2005. There's other records depending on the weight. So you'll have the 787 has its own record as well because it's a lighter jet, et cetera, et cetera. So if you like these type of records, you can take a look. That's the website has a lot of these crazy records. It's interesting to take.
It really is. It really is. Just before we move on, I some breaking news, live breaking news. I just got an alert that an American Airlines flight from Zurich to New York is squawking 7700, which means they've set the transponder code to 7700, which is the international standard for an emergency, and it's diverting to Heathrow. Now, the transponder data was showed that it landed, but it landed on the M4 motorway. Thankfully, and it was an old transponder which was putting out bad data. It has landed safely at Heathrow.
Oh dear God.
But I Flight Radar 24, it's a great Twitter account if you're not following it, got to actually clarified saying it's landed safely at Heathrow. It did not land on the M4. It's an old transponder transmitting bad data. So there you go.
Wow,
Our first piece of live news.
That would have been quite
Oh,
something to have such a plane landing on the M4. Oh wow. Oh God. Not live. Another piece of news that goes again with these stories of competition of new business models is the Lufthansa. So Lufthansa has been, it's a very large carrier, obviously, flag carrier. It's been there for a long time. We mentioned last week that it's been there. They're celebrating the 50th anniversary of post-war operations. But they're having, like a lot of the other, traditional airlines, they're suffering from the competition of both, on one side, the low-cost carriers in Europe, so the Ryanair and the EasyJets in Europe, and the Gulf Airlines, which we mentioned earlier and we'll kind of mention later on. The thing that was interesting that grabbed my attention this week, there was an article that said, before I go there, so Lufthansa has set up no less than two different low-cost structure. One is Germanwings, and the other is Eurowings. Maybe we go once to a segment explaining how this all worked, because it was the first attempt, and then now they're doing a second attempt. The interesting tidbit that the article is said that the Eurowings has an operating cost 40% less than Lufthansa. So you can see the struggle here. You can suddenly realize why they're having 40% is a lot of money that comes with, of course, labor costs, etc. And this is why, and Alex and I have been in the middle of that. This is why actually Lufthansa staff went on strike many times last year. I think more than 10 times. You and me remember we suffered. We had to change planes. Yeah. So this is the 40%.
It's extraordinary, wow. And I think there's also a brand perception thing there, isn't there? Because this is a trend among big established flag carriers to establish small, low-cost carriers, because there is a built-in brand perception that flag carrier equals more expensive than a low-cost carrier, and they can't seem to change the mind. So Lufthansa have obviously done it, as you mentioned. Air France have done it. I think it's called HOP or something like that.
There's Transavia.
There's a small domestic one as well. That
HOP is the name.
Singapore Airlines have done it with Scoot. So it's an interesting strategy, but 40% is a staggering number.
And apparently, it's also the same. I don't know if it's the same article or another, because I've read a few about it. They've also said that the old price structure is 30% more expensive. Lufthansa is 30% more expensive than Turkish, which is another national carrier.
Wow.
So then you can see the labor costs included. This is why we got some strikes, because Lufthansa is negotiating new deals with pilots for Eurowings, which is basically that's the low-cost structure it wants to actually now focus on, because Germanwings was not that successful. So they want to focus on the Eurowings, and they actually want to create a different price structure, different, obviously, negotiation with unions, different pay lines, etc., because of this numbers. It's they have no choice. Actually, Lufthansa now in Germany they basically want to keep, like you just mentioned, that premium feel. They want to basically, Lufthansa will be the premium product and will basically fly most of their flights from Munich and Frankfurt. And that's it. The remainder of the airports in Germany will be catered to by the low-cost structure. Interesting. Yeah.
Very interesting.
Because in the same breath, there was the European Commission, European Social Dialogue Committee. So it's one of the body from the European Commission, the European Union here in Europe, has basically put out a report that says that the old LCC model is obviously disruptive, but also disruptive for the conditions of work from both the staff, but especially the pilots, with a 0-hour contract. Do you know what a 0-hour contract is?
Yeah, there's been a lot of debate about those here in the UK and the legality of them, and it's become a talking point for the upcoming general election here in the UK.
And you can still, Ryanair said that its labor cost was basically €6 per available seat mile. Whereas if you compare that to the US, for our listeners in the US, Spirit Airline is €19.
Wow.
And Southwest is €35. Wow. Yeah, you can see how disruptive these LCCs are. And obviously that creates the questions. And you mentioned that last week when we talked about Aer Lingus about, there's still a reason, there's a clear reason why we have a debate about what are the working conditions of both pilots and crew, because we're going into maybe something that is. So anyway, I'll put the link on the report. It's very, that's part again of this debate of the Gulf airlines, because they also have a lower cost structure in terms of labor cost. This whole thing is actually happening everywhere, and we're right in the middle of that disruption. But in the middle of the disruption, good news for you, Virgin America.
Yes. This is a totally self-indulgent news piece, but I'm gonna roll with it because I'm proud of it. It makes me happy. So Virgin America just posted their earnings, and they've had their second consecutive full year of net profit, which is amazing after 5 years of losses. It's quite expensive to build an airline. I don't know how many of you have done it, but it's not a cheap hobby. It's like golf. So it's to see that they're hitting profitability for the second year in a row is really encouraging. The numbers look good post IPO. That IPO gave them a lot of cash to play with for expansion, for fleet acquisition and upgrade. In a low oil cost economy, it's looking good.
No, bravo, honestly, bravo, because it seemed that Virgin America was always kind of in that paradox. Everybody said high praise. It's a great airline, but he wasn't able to make any money. I mean, not any money, but he was losing money. So this finally 2 years in a row means you kind of broke that paradox.
Yes, and you're growing capacity, which means that number is going to keep going up and up. All being well. For a few years, maybe not just consecutive quarters, it looked bad. It was hemorrhaging cash. And there wasn't any sign of light. And there was, we're looking at $120 a barrel oil. And I have my doubts that our little baby was going to pull through. But look where she is. It's going great. And I'm very proud of it. And I think that everybody that works there should be proud. And I'm 150,000% biased. Yes. So don't even write in and tell us we are. I am.
But though I read some pieces because I went to look for information, and it says that Virgin America you basically generates higher average fares and higher revenue per seat mile that on both long haul and short haul than most of the other airlines, including some of the low cost. It's actually a model that seems to be working. I guess one of the reasons there was no profitability was probably because there was a rapid delivery of new aircraft. You kept getting new aircraft. I mean, you're no longer part of it, but you still have your heart there. And also adding new destinations. I mean, that was the kind of growth period that was very quick and was not able to. But the model seems to be working. There was another article I read, that said that on the transatlantic routes, the average fare and the revenue per mile is higher than AADL United Continental. So
it's good. It's good. I mean, they're picking some big fights, going out of Dallas, and now they're announcing Dallas versus Dallas Austin, which is putting them right up against Southwest, who are the kings of profitability on route. So they're picking big fights, but they're going where the people are. So I'm excited and quietly hopeful for the future.
So now I have to fly them once I've never.
Yeah, you really do. I think you should. I think you'll get a kick out of it.
Moving from Virgin to Delta.
Gosh, this is I'm the king of lighthearted stories because this is pretty funny. There was recently the very prestigious Westminster Dog Show in the US, and apparently Delta misplaced some of these prize-winning dogs, and their owners were furious. They should have been. The passengers were sitting on the plane, looking out and watching for their dogs to be loaded into the cargo hold, the climate-controlled cargo hold, and they didn't see them, and they didn't see them, and they didn't see them. So I love this part. One of them pulled out his Fly Delta app, which allows passengers to track the location of their tagged luggage. And even though the flight crew were saying, "Yeah, they're on board," he's like, "Look at the app. They're not on board." They can prove it. They're not on board. And sure enough, they weren't on board. They had to wait 4 hours for Delta to find these dogs.
Delta had no idea.
They had no idea where these dogs were. So the passengers got off, and they gave them the option to fly on while they looked for their dogs, or wait until their dogs were found. And of course, they
Yeah,
waited.
right.
I mean, it's insane. And there was a statement by Delta that said they were in our constant care the whole time, which is okay, which is
Yeah.
questionable. But there was an industry analyst who said pets go missing a lot more than airlines like to admit, and he suggested if you're considering traveling with your pets that you should fly on the same plane as them, be it in the hold. I mean, you don't get to go in the hold. It would be kind of fun, but you don't get to go in the hold, and it is much. It's worth paying the extra for a nonstop flight if you're traveling with an animal. So
I don't know what is your idea of fun. I don't know if I would be in that climate control old. But as a pet owner, I did transfer pets with British Airways. Everything went fine. It's stressful because you suddenly put them in a
and
cage
expensive.
and they this. Oh yeah, that's expensive. But you don't know. I mean, I went many times to the pilot and say, "Are you sure you actually put the eater on in that little climate control part of the cargo? Because these are no pets. They don't have to, right? So." It's a stressful predicament for a long time. You don't know where they are. I had no app to be able to track them. A bit of a more sad part of for pets, and I want to mention them, and I'm sorry because I'm going to bash two airlines here. Delta had a record of pets who died during transport between 2010 and 2013. And in 2014, that crown was taken by United. The numbers are not staggering. Do not think that, like thousands of pets are dying every year. But still, it's something that you have to be careful about.
Yeah, it's well worth doing your research about the carrier before you put your pet on them.
Exactly. Last piece of news, a bit fast, because otherwise we can go on for hours. All the news we're reading. Interestingly, Russia. So the Russian airspace will now require airlines to actually share the API, so the passenger information. Many other spaces are doing that. The US, obviously. But that's quite an impact because a lot of the flights leaving from Europe to Asia, especially Japan, for instance, North Korea, are going through Russian airspace, and then passengers' detail will have to be shared with the Russian authorities. I'm sure this is actually part of the entire current war is too big a word because we're not in a war, but kind of very leading to conflict type of environment we're having. But this is something that is new, and a lot of people are a bit worried.
Yeah, it's clearly posturing and another sort of Cold War-ish tactic. But as somebody pointed out in this thread, the U.S. already does the same thing, and I think no one could blame Russia for requesting the same level of information as the U.S. has demanded for nearly 10 years. But it's clearly a politically motivated move.
It is. Moving on to innovation, the innovation part of the show. First, so Air France is having a little game you can play on iOS and Android, on iPhone or your Android phone. Before you go, you wait at the gate. You're in economy. You can play a game. You win basically two upgrades for business class. The thing is, usually these things are made because Alex and we both know a little bit of the advertising industry. You see a lot of these small initiatives are made, and basically the reason they're made is because you create a great video, creates great awareness, and then you go on to win an award at Lions, so the Cannes Award for advertising, and meaning there are no real impact at the end of the process. I would say that the interesting tidbit here, so at the very beginning, this initiative was limited to a single airport, so you see it was not that many people would actually win, but Air France has expanded this game, so the availability of the game to other airports, whether it's in China, Hong Kong, Singapore, Indonesia, Japan. You can download the game, compete with other passengers, and win upgrades.
I love it. I love this idea. I think it's fantastic. As long as it's real and that you can actually somebody wins every flight.
Yeah, it wins. You go on the website and you see the name because obviously people usually log in with their nickname. So maybe the airline is not able to know exactly who you are, but there's a page on Air France official website and it says, okay, these are the two upgrades, that the two people that won the upgrades, and they just say, the random Alex007 or something. And then, they can actually claim your price. So it actually works. It's a fun way. I mean, it's not going to revolutionize
I know
everything.
it's a
But
nice
it's a
idea.
fun way to get.
I'd love
Yeah,
to know how many flights, how many games they play per day, and how many upgrades they give, and things like that. But what a nice idea to really make someone's day. It could make their entire year if this is the once of a
correct.
lifetime journey, and all of a sudden you're upgraded, or it's your honeymoon or something. I think it's a lovely idea. Why not? Why not?
Yeah, I think so too, and I think we should have at some point maybe a segment on upgrades, because a lot of airlines have started introducing a system of bidding to upgrade yourself on flights. It's an interesting innovation as
Yes, I
well.
think I agree. There's definitely an entire show on how to get upgraded and how not to get upgraded. Let's do that.
So from being upgraded to getting
Yeah, so
drunk.
this is slightly tangential to aviation strictly, but it was such a great story that I wanted to share it. So there is a device called a breathometer that is you connect it to your smartphone and it calculates your blood alcohol level. You blow into this tube or whistle kind of thing, and it shares your blood alcohol level and shows you how long it's going to take you to, based on some very other stats of how long you'll be safe again. But which is interesting in itself. I'm hugely for anything that prevents drunk driving and responsible drinking, but they've now integrated it with Uber. So if you blow into this thing and you're above the safe driving level and wherever you are, it will go, hey, you should not be driving. Here are a bunch of options, including an Uber car, and it can be here in 3 minutes and will cost you X to get home, which is really clever. And they have things like call a cab, Uber, find something to eat, grab a room, things like that. So they really want people to make good choices when they have maybe had one too many drinks, and using data and existing infrastructure like Uber and things like that is is a really nice idea.
In terms of if I go back to airlines, have you? I don't know if you've seen, but there's been a call recently here in the UK to maybe even ban alcohol from airports because there's been a rise of drunken behavior in flight, so you can have dry flights. But there's been calls to actually ban alcohol from the airports in the UK. I'll find the article again. I think it was somebody shared it last week. But that's still, that can be a problem
It absolutely
sometimes.
can. I think people underestimate the effects that altitude has on the body when it processes alcohol. And it doesn't matter if you drink it on board or if you drink it pre-flight, it still compounds and magnifies the negative effects pretty considerably, including dehydration. It's a great way to have bad jet lag. I'd be interested to read that article. I'm always amazed when I go into a British airport at 6:30 in the morning and people are
Oh
drinking
yeah.
like it's 6:30 at
I
night.
mean, for me,
I can't do that.
moving to the UK and starting to fly from here, I was like, what is going on? Like in gin and tonic, like at 8 in
Can't
the
do it.
morning. I'm like,
Can't
no
do it.
way. But anyway, talking about liquor, I remember having I don't even remember the name of a liquor on China Eastern. So I flew China Eastern a few years ago I think it was from Shanghai to Japan, but I'm not entirely sure. Anyway, what I remember though, it was that it was a very difficult flight in terms of communication. I couldn't actually communicate very easy with the staff, again, because mostly it was almost like an inland flight. So China Eastern has introduced a kind of a series now, a game. So basically, what you can do is with your phone, you follow an account and you can start asking stuff to your, so it's like a personal assistant asking from water to anything to the crew via an app on your phone. What do you think that you would actually use an app like this instead of just pressing the cold button?
No. I think that you have to entirely change the culture of the cabin crew to do that, who have for 40 or 50 years they have indicators in the areas where they are based to show if somebody's pressed one of those buttons, and they respond to it sooner or later. I wouldn't use this. Why would you complicate the process?
Well, so obviously this can do a lot of other things because it's like, again, you can talk to other passengers. It's not limited by the way, to China Eastern because it's something you can follow on Weibo, which is a big social network in China. But China Eastern has dedicated a channel for interaction with the crew. I'm not sure if it's something that will be actually widely used or not, but it'd be interesting to see if it follows. Keeping up on the having some kind of assistant, Honeywell Aerospace is testing voice control within the flight deck. So they've been testing that with an Embraer. So basically, you have a tablet. The pilots have a tablet, and instead of putting commands with the hand, they can actually press exactly what you would do on an iPhone. You press first on a button that activates Siri, and then you would say give flight commands. What do you think?
That's neat. I think if it frees up hands and eyes, why not?
That's exactly what the pilots actually said, because a lot of pilots were a bit concerned, like, yeah, right, I'm never going to use this. And then they said, this is the biggest thing, is not to have to look down, is being able to simply actually order commands. The problem is obviously still noise and accents, because some accents are not easily understood. But I think it's an interesting innovation that is going.
If you're a pilot, write in and tell us what you think.
Yeah. Keeping innovation like 3D printing.
Yeah, this is really interesting. So Rolls-Royce are going to fly a Trent XWB engine, which is the engine for the A350-1000, with the largest ever 3D printed part. This is staggering. It's 1.5 meters diameter and a half a meter thick, completely titanium, but printed. This isn't going to be, this component itself isn't going to be printed for the production models yet, but the fact that they can design, prototype, and now actually fly something as big and complex as this, which is the front engine bearing and holds 48 of the aerofoils that make up the turbine is really amazing. And they reckon that if they're able to turn this into something they use every day, it could trim the time and for like manufacturing time by 30%. So pretty amazing innovation.
Yeah, and you could also have, instead of manufacturing in a single place, you could have other places just
you just send them the file.
yeah, the blueprint. That's an interesting innovation. I agree. I think it's something would be followed. They announced it, I think, already last year, but it's I think GE is doing something similar
and
as well.
They've been doing stuff like this for 5 years, but never at the scale nor for an operational component of this magnitude.
Moving on to another aircraft we always mention, this show, the 747. So ANA has stopped flying the 747-400 with their last plane, last 747, last March. But I mean, Japanese have always been amazing at, all the memorabilia they will sell you on top of their branding. And they have this website where you can buy a lot of stuff related to flying, to ANA, the brand, etc. And what they've done, that last aircraft that was decommissioned, they've actually taken parts of it and you actually buy them.
My
so
gosh,
you can buy.
This is going to be expensive.
yeah. Actually not. There's a keychain. You have part of a window, basically, with something actually printed on it. You can have also a similar piece that it looks like a tail of the 747 you can put on your desk, also part of the window. These are actually not very expensive. But then you can actually buy part of the exhaust turbine.
Wow.
And that's really expensive. It comes in a very nicely wooden box, etc. But the most interesting part, you can actually buy a premium seat. So the first class seat that was in the top deck, you have to go through a lottery because there's so much demand. These are very expensive. You can buy either a single seat. They're not the new fancy seats. They're still angle and everything. We can have a single seat or a double.
Yeah,
wow.
I've always wanted to do that. I think that would be cool.
The reason I mentioned that, guys, if you want to do it first, you have obviously to read Japanese. I'll put the link. So find someone in Japan, because you can only buy with a credit card in Japan. You have to be an ANA My Club member. So there's a lot of stuff here. And it's a lottery to win the seat. But if you want to try, you should actually try. In shorter news, very quickly, I've heard a show talking about other podcasts, because there are other podcasts available than us. I've heard, I don't know if you know this, Omega Tau. It's a podcast about science and engineering. They've done an episode 2 hours about the Concorde,
fantastic,
with an ex-pilot called John Hutchinson. It's amazing. I was just going to tell one story so that gives you like a teaser. he explains how it was very difficult to the Concorde in terms of fuel consumption to be in a holding pattern. It had to land very quickly, and JFK ATC became so in love with that plane that when there was this thing happen at some moment, they actually find a way to put the Concorde on a separate frequency so nobody else could no other pilot can hear, and it would prioritize the plane over the other ones without anyone else knowing, stuff
Wow.
like that. Yeah. It's a great episode. I'll put the link. You should absolutely listen to it. App of the week,
Yeah, so
Alex?
I love this site. It's openflights.org, and it is a flight tracking app, personal flight tracking app. So you can import or enter all of the flights that you've taken, and it arranges them in this beautiful map so you can see where you've been. You can list your flights by year, by airport, and it gives you these wonderful stats at the end of it. You can analyze it, and it will show you, for 2014. I'm just looking at my stats so far. It's like, how far have you gone? What was the longest trip? What was the shortest trip? The northernmost, southernmost, westernmost, what classes, airports, things like that. And it can import from like TripIt. So you don't have to type in manually everything, and you just sync with your TripIt account, and it will pull in all of the information for you. So otherwise, I have to admit, it does get a little bit tedious to to list all of your flights.
Yeah.
But so if I analyze all my stuff for the last 277,000 miles of flights, my longest journey was Heathrow to Singapore, 6,758 miles. My shortest was Tallinn to Helsinki at 62 miles. I've flown around the world 11.13 times, to the moon 1.16 times. So it's a lovely, lovely stuff, I've flown to Mars 0.00080 times. But like the number of unique airports you've been to, I think it's a community-driven site, but
Yeah, it's open source, which has the great thing about it is not only you can, like you just said, you can import from existing closed source, because TripIt is basically a bit closed source, but then you can do whatever with your data. I've actually seen people actually exporting the data and creating crazy visualizations of their flights using Tableau software or other type of software. So you can do pretty much, you're free to do whatever you want. So if you want to play a little bit with it, if you know how to, you can create amazing, images of what has been your life traveling and flying in the skies. And so, and I think I think they work by donations, and I think it's probably worth giving a donation
if you
to
use it
guys like this
reasonably
because
regularly, yeah, I think it's a great app. Like, you can look at your most used airlines of your life and things like that. I like things like this because it's personal. The map is great. At the end of every calendar year, I write a blog post on my site that's my year in cities.
yeah, true.
And I always use this site for the data, and it's just a joy to play with. And it's really, really, it's not, to be fair, they're not the most beautiful site in the world, but functionally, it is a joy. It really is. So, log in, import. If you use TripIt, which you really should be using TripIt, import all your stuff from there, because it's a neat little site. It's fun to play with.
Yes, it is. To be very honest, I've only put part of my flights, and now I'll play with.
Well, the
it
cool thing
even
is you
more.
just log into TripIt, import all, bam, you're done.
Yeah, but I missed some flights
Oh.
and trips. That's the reason I have to go back in time. And obviously, I'm going to do it one day, and I've never had the time to do it. But it would show actually if I go to my flights, it would show that since 2010, I've been flying a lot of Gulf Airlines. So this is our topic of the show of the week. Is this we just mentioned the big debate that is raging in the beginning of the show, and Alex and me wanted to take a look a little bit at the inception. Why is all this debate going, and where these three airlines are coming from? Because when we say Gulf Airlines, the debate is always centralized on three: Emirates, Qatar Airways, and Etihad. Want to start with?
Yeah, this is such an interesting topic, and I think it's so present in the news at the moment. It obviously is. It's come up in every single episode, I think, since the beginning of this podcast, all those weeks ago. But yeah, you're right. So we need to mention that those three are not the only three Middle Eastern carriers. They are all extremely young. Emirates was founded only in 1985, but there's Saudi, as you mentioned earlier in the show, Gulf Air, Oman Air. There's loads. Yemenia, Kuwait.
Yeah.
some have come and gone. Some have come and gone and come back again um, for various reasons. But these ones are the ones that have shown the most meteoric growth from literally nothing to extraordinary behemoths of the airline world. And so if we take the story of Emirates. So Emirates was started in '85 by one of the crown princes. And
but interestingly, sorry to interrupt there. Interesting, the reason it was created, because this is also something because of the current debate of the ME3. This is how people call it, ME3, Middle East, and the three big ones of the Middle East. A lot of people think that they were created just to actually disrupt everything. No, Emirates was created because Gulf Air, which is from Bahrain, was cutting back on its routes from Dubai. And they were like, we need to have routes from Dubai from here because we live in the middle of this peninsula and we need to have flights. Thus, they give some money to, I think it was wet leasing two aircraft from Pakistan airline or something.
They leased one plane from PIA. And they had I love this. They had a donated 727 from the family's private fleet. I know, as one does. And then his uncle was tasked with running it for a while. And they hired an ex British aviation consultant. They had $10 million to play with. And of course, that was a pretty good investment because look where they are now. And the first flight was Bahrain to Karachi in 1985. And 5 years later, they were doing 21 cities, in big cities, Frankfurt, London, Singapore. And then next year, they gave $65 million, and then 58 new airplanes. When September 11th happened, the market fell out of airplanes for obvious reasons. So they snapped up 58 new airplanes and started the A380 thing. So in terms of aviation history, their growth has been exponential. It's really been extraordinary.
But they've really been in the picture in the past, let's say 5 years. Not that they haven't been before, but what we see that the current product, the quality of the product. So some people might find it tacky because of the colors, but the quality of the product. I remember I flew the first time Emirates in 2010, I believe. That was not my first experience with Gulf Airline because that was Etihad. Actually, I'll come to that story later. But I remember that that even the business section was not that fancy business section we see here. I had flown from Manila to Dubai, and it was still very old angle seats. So I want people to understand that it was progressive. It went very fast, but that it was not since inception. There were these crazy planes with like all luxury.
That's an extremely good point. All three of them started as very modest airlines. And I think it's a question of right time, but also, I think more importantly, right place.
Yeah, I think this is one of the key things that people do not understand. And go with it, but look at a map.
Yeah, look at a map. The Dubai and Abu Dhabi and Doha are in a geographic sweet spot. They sit up across this path linking Europe and Asia. And this statistic is staggering. 2/3 of the world's population live within an 8-hour flight of those three cities. And nearly 90% of humanity resides within the range of an A380 or 777 departing from the Gulf.
Yeah, and the thing is also with economics of a flight, that 8-hour range you just mentioned is perfect. There's a sweet spot also in terms of long haul flights. Having 6, 7, 8 hours is a great spot to make money out of long haul flights. So this is something, like you said, they just happen to be right in this middle. It makes more sense to a lot of people, even from the US is actually basically, in terms of geography, in terms of hub, it's completely out there. It doesn't make any sense unless you live in the US.
It makes no sense. As a layover market, there's none. There's no sense.
Even Europe compared to the Middle East, if you're flying again from the US, it makes actually more sense. Again, geographically, to stop over in the Middle East, rather, or even Turkey, because this is why Turkish is making this big deal. But there's a geography. There's just a lucky being there just makes a lot of sense geographically. And I think this is something that a lot of people do not understand, especially now you see a lot of the complaints that are made about these three airlines, and we'll go over the next two a bit later, is that, oh, but you know what? most of the airlines until now had their market was local people. So Americans fly from the US externally and they come back. So the flag airlines were created to cater for local people. And it's true that the model there is opposite. There's not OND, it's a transit system. You put people that stop over in Dubai or Doha or etc., and they keep on flying.
This is true, but it's certainly not unique. I mean, Hong Kong and Singapore have
Correct.
very small populations, but it's the same thing. They were built on this transit model for all intents and purposes. They are also established financial capitals, but they are not. Again, it's the same with the U.S. Their geography is not perfect. They're very southeast, and it used to be that if you wanted to get to, from San Francisco or New York to India, you would go Singapore, San Francisco, Hong Kong to India, or San Francisco, Frankfurt. And these are inefficient ways, but with this sort of nexus of efficiency and range of aircraft and comfort levels for long haul flight and range and speed and geography, it makes total sense to fly in and out of the Middle East, no matter where you're going. It's such a perfect storm in a positive way for those guys.
The other thing that is interesting in this story is that we tend to put these three together, but actually these three are not exactly similar. I mean, of course, you just mentioned Emirates now has become a behemoth. Yeah, it's the largest operator of A380, the largest operator of 777s. It's like huge airline. I think it's now the fourth largest airline in the world in terms. Was it in terms of passengers? Kilometer
revenue passenger miles.
Yeah, exactly. But it's not a flag carrier. I mean, Qatar Airways and Etihad are flag carrier. Actually, Etihad, and maybe we can mention this one as a second one. Etihad was developed later than Emirates. I think it was created around the early this century, so 2003 was it?
Like that.
But this one is government owned. This one is the flag carrier of the UAE, so of the United Emirates. Whereas Emirates, the airline, is a private airline that obviously has, because this is another contentious issue. Some people say, yeah, but there's collusion, etc. But one airline is a flag carrier, one isn't. So do you want to go over the model from Etihad? It is much smaller.
Yeah,
right?
it is smaller, but it is in many ways the same model. It's efficient long-haul airplanes doing a transit or layover model with extremely high-level, even more premium facilities and amenities than Emirates. They know that they're. But here's the interesting thing: all three of them recognize that the gold, if you will, is in those Southeast Asian routes, which is interesting to me.
Correct.
That's not what I would have thought, but they are going hard after the Southeast Asian routes, and because that's, I think, where the traditional stopover points were in, sort of Malaysia, Singapore, Thailand, places like that. So they've thrown so much capacity at the Gulf to Southeast Asian routes. For example, capacity between Thailand and the Gulf states has increased 80% in 1 year. But the capacity to Europe has only grown 4%. But Thai Airways is only 5% of those seats, and the three Middle Eastern carriers take up the lion's share of the rest. That's a financialist.com statistic, which is amazing.
Yeah, in the same article, he mentions how Singapore Airlines, you mentioned Singapore, share traffic to and from the Middle East has shrunk 55% since 2009, and even 50% more in 2013. So these are the ones who are suffering the most. We keep hearing, obviously, about U.S. airlines and Lufthansa and Air France KLM, but I mean, these airlines are also suffering a lot.
And if you've built your entire platform on that transit passenger, or not, the bulk of your platform, which I feel like Singapore Airlines did, to have a 55% reduction over 3 or 4 years has got to hurt.
And at the end, and that's the other thing, they're buying a lot of planes. We're mentioning Etihad. Etihad has ordered, I think, so it has only one A380, but it's ordered 10 in total, whereas obviously Emirates, for that, is just insane. Emirates, I think Dubai Airport, because of Emirates, handles almost 300 A3 80 departures a week. I mean, this is just insane. They single-handedly saved the A380 program. But Etihad is buying a lot of A350. So I think they've ordered 40 of the 900 version. They've ordered more than 20 of the 1000 version with even more option. They're buying A321s, all these new planes. And because of that, they also have a much younger
Yes.
fleet than most of the other airlines.
And I think that it's important to talk about that as well. It's not just that it's convenient to stop over in Dubai or Abu Dhabi or Doha. They have invested significantly in the passenger experience, the end-to-end passenger experience on every level of the service. So they have gone so far ahead of the game. Not exclusively. This isn't exclusive to the Middle East. There are other airlines in other regions that do this, but their economy cabins are comfortable. There's IFE. The seats are good. The food is as good as you're going to get in an economy cabin. But the business class and first class, especially, because they know that so much of that money is coming from business travelers, i.e., it's on expenses. They have really dragged everybody up by the from the bottom by investing so much in that experience, to the point where Doha Airport has separate terminals and facilities for business and first class passengers. So it's not a question of availability and timings and just it's slightly shorter to go through Dubai. The overall experience is better. They've taken the best of the service level from the Southeast Asian airlines, and they've hired a bunch of people away from airlines like Singapore Airlines and Cathay and Thai. They've taken the best from the efficiency perspective of airlines like Lufthansa. I can't think of many other airlines that are ultra efficient like Lufthansa.
Lufthansa has its own also first-class terminal, I think, in Frankfurt. But you're right. This is something I remember because I was living back then for a little while in Cyprus. And so for me, choosing when I needed to fly to Asia, choosing a Middle Eastern airline was out of simply necessity because there was no other way. I didn't want to fly back to London, then to fly again to Asia. So I had flown Etihad to go there. And I said, okay, and I looked at the price and I started flying Emirates. And very quickly it became a gold member, whatever, status. I was lucky to fly a lot in business class, and it's true that I was like, "What is going on in this business class?" I mean, and I'm even talking about the earlier models of business class. It was lie flat but still angled on Emirates, and I was honestly blown away. Then they would obviously upgrade me very liberally. So I was in first class many times, which first of all I would not pay for, and second of all it was a new experience for me. The level of service includes, by the way, because you mentioned the end-to-end point, they have a chauffeur service. So if you have a ticket in business, and obviously first, you can actually, in a lot of cities around the world, it's included in the price. The limousine picks you up at home. I mean, these are the kind of things that are expensive, obviously, but that creates, obviously, this is what we're seeing currently in the debate. A lot of people just talking about the experience, because they're like, when you compare that to a New York airline, even some airlines in Europe, they're like, well, but as a pure customer, I prefer flying on Emirates, Qatar, or Etihad.
Yeah,
obviously.
and in many ways, that stopover reduces the price of the ticket substantially. So flying directly on someone like Cathay from London to Hong Kong is £500 for illustrative purposes. And if I went via Dubai on Emirates, which the experience is arguably comparable, it's £350. So
the other thing that is staggering is to see the expansion of the airports over there. Yes. Obviously, these airports are just, Dubai is one of the largest airports in the world now. International traffic, passenger traffic is the largest in the world. They're actually building a second airport like in Dubai, which will probably cater to 140, 160 million passengers. So I think that for the UAE, I think it was for Dubai, aviation is poised to become a quarter of the GDP by 2016.
It's amazing. And in many ways, I think it's forcing the entire industry to reevaluate the product, which is good. Anything that's incrementally improving the passenger experience, but these guys are not going to let up. The Gulf Airlines are going to add 534 new wide-body planes between now and 2027. God. So not only are they getting capacity, they're getting efficiency, because these are new, more efficient airplanes. The legacy carriers and flag carriers are sitting on older airplanes, And there was a study by Credit Suisse that said that Lufthansa will need to reduce their costs on flights to Southeast Asia by 40% to stay competitive. How are they going to do that? They can't reduce the in-flight amenities because they're already losing on that front. They have to order more efficient airplanes. I don't envy them at all.
No,
I
I
think
don't envy
we,
them
we,
at
we
all.
could talk about this for an hour and not even scratch the
Yeah, I
surface.
mean we're gonna cut because we're a bit late today on in terms of but it's the one thing that they will have to I think about in this region is how to manage air traffic control, because it's becoming very heavily
Yes.
constrained, especially because a lot of the military flights are
And
happening.
we're going to
at the
try
same
and get
time.
some folks on the show that are experts in the region, either peripherally or directly involved with its expansion, to answer this and explore it in more depth, because I really do think it's a fascinating topic and is really at the front of the conversation.
Yeah, we'll do a part two, because I think you mentioned that several times. We've seen that Etihad, for instance, is buying a lot of equity in other airlines in the world. So they're seeing it's actually gaining weight in the world with other means. Emirates is pushing to actually have a very large fleet. Etihad is going into buying, Seychelles and Alitalia, of course. So it's a very interesting shift in how the industry is seen. And this is why, again, we're seeing all this controversy currently, whether it's in Europe, whether it's in Asia, whether obviously in the US. We mentioned that at the beginning of the show. So I think we'll keep talking about this and we'll invite guests to talk about it. But since we're a bit over time, let's go quickly back to Munich. Or no, there was the question
of the week. This is
this
is a nice one that's kind of self-contained. We can answer it pretty quickly without skipping over any of the details. But it's, what is the largest airline in the world by fleet size? Now, there's a load of different ways to answer what is the biggest airline.
Yeah, I asked you that because we were talking about creating this show and talking about the Gulf Airlines. I was like, Emirates must be so big, it must be there. And you tell me, no, Paul,
yeah, not even close. But there are many ways to answer the question, what is the biggest airline? And I think in this instance, we have to answer it by fleet size. We'll talk about the other ways in a second. But the largest airline in the world, we'll go straight to number one by fleet size, is Delta, with 1,280 airplanes. Now, to give you some context, Emirates have 221 airplanes. So they have over 1,000 more airplanes. This is Delta mainline and subsidiaries and feeders like Delta Connection. No matter how you cut it, it is an extraordinary number. Very close to them, nipping at their heels, and number two is United with 1,264, again, mainline and subsidiaries. And in third place, American Airlines. The rest of the top 10, Southwest Airlines, China Southern, which was surprising to me, Lufthansa, Air France, Air Canada, and China Eastern. So no Middle Eastern carriers in the top 10 in terms of fleet size. I'm quietly confident that that's going to change in the next 10 years.
Yeah, especially Emirates. When you look at the number of orders they have, the others are still a bit lagging, but Emirates will get
now
there.
If you very quickly look at the question slightly differently and look at the world's biggest airlines by capacity, it is an interesting and very different story. So it goes United. So United have gone from number 2 to number 1. Delta, American, Emirates. So Emirates have gone from not even on the list, not even in the top 25, to number 4. And then the rest of it is pretty similar to the previous list: Southwest, Lufthansa, British Airways, Air France, China Southern, and Singapore Airlines. Now, the difference is in the size, the average size of the plane and the number of seats they can carry, and also the distance that the average flight is. So we'll post a link to the definition of revenue passenger miles and revenue passenger kilometers, because that's how capacity and load factor are measured. So there you go. There's the answer to that question. And now let's.
But it encapsulates the debate that we'll be having, because it's like, how do you deal with, you have more than 1,000 aircrafts and you have a new airlines coming up with newer aircraft, more efficient, etc. And how do I react? I cannot replace all my aircraft in an instant. So this is interesting, and I think this is why the reason. So I'm the reason we had the question. We didn't take a question from the audience. I asked that to Alex because I wanted to know. I was so sure that Emirates was so big, and actually was not that big, at least for one part of the definition. Like you said, going to Munich, back to Germany, back to Lufthansa. So Munich is one of the two. I mentioned that earlier, become the premium hubs for Lufthansa. We've both flown there, both on layovers. I don't know if you've ever stopped there.
No.
Have you? I've many times. There's a conference called DLD, which happens in January in Munich, and I've stopped there. It's. What do you think about the airport?
I like it.
Before
I like
go.
it. It's a great airport for a layover, and they know that, and they have embraced their status as a layover airport, and they have made a lot of innovations to make it a very, very good layover airport. Interestingly, they were named the best airport in Europe 4 years in a row, which is amazing, because there's some good airports there's also some terrible airports in Europe, but
yeah,
but I love that they have embraced this. We know that a lot of our passengers are transit passengers, and we are going to do everything we can to help those transit passengers, so that they have a standard now that you only need 30 minutes to connect, which is unbelievable.
I'm always always scared that I'm going to miss a connection again, because you and me come from a non-Schengen country. We have to go through passport control, but we actually make it.
They have built the airport not just architecturally, each terminal to facilitate this 30-minute this layover guarantee. Well, I don't know if they even guarantee it, but they've said that there's no other airport in Europe that comes anywhere close to this average transit time. And when you get off a plane, as you get off, there's a screen facing you that shows all of the possible onward connection for everybody on that plane. And this is so simple in its genius, an arrow pointing you which way to turn to get to your gate. It's so simple.
Yeah. The Terminal 2, which is a terminal used by Lufthansa, is especially amazing for that, because it's like a huge open plaza. Because it's a square. So in terms of architecture, it's maybe nothing like Doha in these airports we mentioned earlier, but it's a big square. It's very easy to navigate, because again, it's a square. You have an arrow. You know where you're going. It's gate that number, and there's like no obstacle. It's very well thought in terms of navigability. So in terms of the user experience, it might not be the most beautiful you'll ever see, but it's extremely efficient. And
efficient.
I love
it's a great airport, and they actually even have this bus service. So if you do need to change terminals, they have a bus service that only goes through security controlled areas. So even if you have to change airlines, terminals, you don't have to go back through security, because they've built the bus route so that it always stays secure airside. Just little things like that is so simple.
I would add, though, because that's my only gripe about that airport, is that there's a lot of time you end up being bussed back to the terminal and not having a jetway.
That's true.
So this is my only sometimes gripe. Maybe because I'm actually anxious. I'm like, I'm never going to make my connection. I've always made it. But being in a bus kind of augments my anxiety. I'm like, come on, bus, come on, driver, let's go to the door now. And I have these kind of feelings. This is maybe my only gripe. I would, if you follow me on Twitter a few times, and I apologize for that, I've been like, come on, or at least give me air miles while I'm sitting on the bus as part of my flight.
You just earned 0.3 of an air mile. But
they are building it's almost done. You can see it now if you fly there. They're building the satellite of Terminal 2, so they're expanding basically Terminal 2, so that will create more jetways, it create more space as well. So it's an airport that is big. I think it's 40 million passengers a year, so it's a very big airport, very important airport. And they're also thinking about a third runway, which we know here in the UK it's a big debate. It's also a big debate there, because one of the key things about that airport that I find very interesting, it is one of the most forward-looking in terms of environment and noise control. They have actually the descent, and I don't know if you realize that the descent on Munich is actually a bit special, because they actually calculated the descent not on the features of the surroundings, but actually to reduce as maximum the noise for the people surrounding the airport. So it is a bit the takeoff as well. Listen to the engines, and you'll see they go through something that's usually not happening, because they wanted to limit there. And although the new runway, contrary to London, the new runway at Heathrow would actually impact way more people. But in Munich, the new runway would not. And still, this is very German. I think it's only 1%. But still, they have the airport is saying, okay, we'll wait. would not, because they are at capacity at peak hours. They are okay to wait. They're okay to go to court. They have this kind of, it's a much more civilized debate, it seems, than in other airports, because they really went all in terms of noise control, but also environment. I mean, the airport is almost self-sufficient in terms of energy. It's an amazing
It is a great
airport.
It's a
and I love the logo.
Yes,
very.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to transit through. If you need to get from somewhere in Europe or even outside of Europe, it's a great airport to have a layover in.
And on that, I think we'll again over time, but I think we just like to.
I know it's we love to talk.
One last thing, guys, ladies and gentlemen, will listen to us next week because both Alex and I will be in Barcelona for Mobile World Congress. So the show might not be recorded on Monday, but a bit later in the week. So please bear with us. And this is why we give you that extra 20 minutes.
Yeah, exactly. This is bonus content to make up for the fact that we're going to be a little bit late next week.
Exactly. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks,
Bye-bye,
guys.
Alex.
Take care.
Godspeed.